In this lesson, we will be discussing how to write a good melody. There's some debate about whether to build a melody around a chord progression or a chord progression around a melody. However, I have found that it is more effective to build the chords around the melody as, especially in orchestral music, the melody is the centerpiece of the song. The first step in creating a melody when working with a blank slate is to pick a key to work in. This constrains the notes that we are allowed to use and helps us to make educated choices. For simplicity's sake, we will be writing in the key of A minor, which means that we are constraining ourselves to write with only the white keys. There will be more information about chords and keys in coming lessons. A good melody is like a good poem. It follows a form, it has rhythm, and more often than not, certain lines in a sense rhyme with each other. Let me show you an example. Here we have an 8-bar melody that follows a form. You can see the form here labeled in markers. The melody is split up into 2-bar sections. The first 2 bars is the A section, which simply means it is the first pattern of music. The second section is labeled B, which means that it is different than A. The third section is labeled A prime, which means that it is similar or rhymes with the A section. Then finally we have the C section, which is different than both the A and B sections. When creating patterns for your own melody, it is really up to you to determine what pattern you would like to use. However, if there is too much repetition, the melody will be too boring, and not enough repetition will make the melody too complex. A good rule of thumb is to have at least one 2-bar section that is either repeated or closely resembled in the pattern. So let us write a melody of our own. We will be using a piano as our instrument because with orchestral music it is often a good idea to start with a piano sketch. The pattern that we will follow will be A, B, B prime, and then back to A. Each of these will be in 2-bar sections, just like the previous example. The best melodies primarily use a stepwise motion, which means that you move from one note to the next note in the key without skipping notes in between. But a few occasional leaps in the notes is a great way to add the energy. We also need to consider what instruments the melody will be played with. Since I think this part of the melody will be played with legato strings, we are going to be careful not to write anything that's too fast, and we will have nothing that's smaller than an 8th note. So we can start here on A, we'll jump up to E, and then we'll step back down to C, using that stepwise motion. Okay, this melody is really boring. What can we do to make this melody more interesting? We can change things up a little bit by pushing and pulling certain notes to make a more interesting rhythm. Let's see what we can come up with, shall we? With just a few tweaks to the rhythm, the melody becomes more interesting. We can spice things up a little bit by adding a few 8th notes. Great, now this is a pattern I can work with. Let's move on to the B section. Something we need to take into consideration before moving to the B section is how the transition from A to B will sound. I think B should start on the note just below where we left off. To continue the pattern, it is important to keep the melody simple so the listener won't get lost or disoriented in the music. Since the A section has a lot of movement, we can add some contrast to the melody by having the B section start with a hold. We will end the B section by having a few notes that will lead into the B prime section. We are going to start by copying the B section over, then we will move the first note to the next ascending note in the B pattern. So the B prime section has the same rhythm as B, and all we did was we just changed one note. Let us now copy over the A section to the last 2 bars. This time, rather than changing the first note of the A section to where B prime leaves off, we are going to add an extra note to B prime that will help lead us back into the A section. Great. Now interestingly enough, we can make a 32-bar section of our song by building a larger form. So this 8-bar pattern becomes just the A section in our 32-bar melody. To make this easier to understand, we can think of notes as letters, the 2-bar phrases as words, the 8-bar phrases as sentences, and the 32-bar phrase as a paragraph. In fact, I will change the name of the marker track that we have to words, and I will create a new marker track called sentences. The form for our 32-bar melody can be A prime, B, B prime. So let's work on the A prime section now by copying over the 8-bar melody and making just a few adjustments to the notes. We can raise some of the top notes to add even more excitement. Since the listener is already familiar with the pattern we are using, we can get away with more leaps and alterations without it becoming disorienting. If we were to listen to A prime without the context of A, it might be a little confusing to listen to, but within the context of the song, it makes sense. Now that we have finished the A prime sentence, which is very similar to the A sentence, we can work on the B sentences. Just like the A sentences, we need to figure out a form of the words we are going to use. Simply to avoid sounding repetitive, I will use the example I used before for the B section. And I will make some minor variations for the B prime sentence. Now remember, not every sentence has to be exactly 4 words, and not every paragraph needs to be exactly 4 sentences. Great, here's a paragraph we can work with. In the next lesson, we will focus on creating a chord progression to go with this 32-bar paragraph. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to support me on my website, tunebytes.net. The link will be in the description.